We have the opportunity this afternoon really to spend a little bit of time with two really wonderful, wonderful people. And I say that having known them a very, very long time. And these are two extraordinary individuals in their own right. They are tremendously busy. Mariko has a big show at the Royal Academy. Shirin is about to head off to Egypt, is that right, for a period of filming for the next year. So to have them both in the same room, frankly, is just unheard of. So I'm very, very excited to spend a little time with them today. My name is Benjamin Ginocchio. I am the editor-in-chief of Art Noksha magazine and artinfo.com. I'm going to try to stay out of the way and to let these two extraordinary people tell us a little bit about the projects they're working on, and then try to have a brief conversation with them about their own artistic practices, which are so radically diverse, actually, and different, that I think it's going to make for an interesting conversation. Mariko is going to begin with her presentation and talk a little bit about her work, and then Shirin's going to do a short presentation. So, Mariko, thank you for being here.
Yes. Hello everyone. I'm going to show you a few short video and also give you a little presentation of the current work. And I'd like to begin with the video. Yes. This digital exhibition will bring to life my installation, Primal Rhythm, before it is completed in the real world. Primal Rhythm consists of a sun pillar and a moonstone. Here you see the sun pillar, which was installed in July 2011, and a digital render of what the moonstone will look like, which will be installed in the near future. I was looking for a site for my project that could accommodate winter solstice light. I did research and looked around the world. I found Seven Light Bay of Miyako Island, south of Okinawa. This model shows how the sunlight will come down to the bay during the winter solstice and hit the sun pillar, casting a shadow onto the moonstone, like a sundial. Throughout the rest of the year, the moonstone will float in a bay with its color changing in accordance to the tidal movement. It will shift from red at low tide to blue at high tide, with 5 colors in between. Primal Rhythm is a prayer for peace and harmony for every living being on earth. Here, you can see what Primal Rhythm will look like during the winter solstice, when the sunlight hits the sun pillar and casts its shadow onto the moonstone. From the beginning of time, the sun of the winter solstice has been believed to be a symbol of rebirth. Here, you can see what the moonstone looked like floating in a bay. Its color will shift gently with the tides, changing constantly, just like inhaling. This work is designed to unite the celestial and terrestrial. It will be a lasting testimony that pays respect to the natural beauty of our surroundings on Earth. This video is actually exhibiting online at Adobe Museum Adobe Museum of Digital Media on a website. And This project, I started 2007, and I form a non-profit organization. It's called FAO Foundation, and our mission is to install site-specific permanent installation per continent to honor each installation to honor the nature and choosing the character kind of represent the nature on the earth. The first project we have done, it's in Miyako Island of Okinawa, and you can see it's a kind of work installed in the ocean. And as was on the video, this work called Sun Pillar, and it's made out of layered lucite, and placement will be, as I explained, that it's directly connected to the direction of the winter solstice. The winter solstice is a symbol of a rebirth and beginning of a new cycle of nature. So I wanted to kind of honor the nature of ocean, but it's also the other work, Moonstone, to represent the rhythm of the sea. So the title is called Primal Rhythm, and this is a more close-up. It's 4 meters tall and 5 tons, and structurally can survive for 1,000 years. And stone been there for millions of years, so hopefully this will be last as long as it can be. Just wanted to show you a little bit of a process that we do take care of the nature. So we wanted to install the way cannot harm any nature at all, or sea culture like coral. So we place the scaffolding as not harming coral in the sea, and then also not using any the crane or machine. It's all by hand. So we used chain block to kind of very ancient way to install the work. And this is some photographs of the actual work. It's in floating, floating on a sea and moving and close to the rock, and slowly by a chain block, the raising into the position. And this was done by all local people of Miyako Island, and even the float was pushed by the human, and this was when we installed. And so it was very important for me to really make local people to be involved in this project. So I invited professors and engineers from university, the local university of Ryukyu University, and do an evaluation committee to evaluate the environmentally protected and all this kind of, it's open to public to view if it's to evaluate if it's the right way to install. And this work was installed last year, July and August. And then in December, the day of the winter solstice, I did a special event. And so, this is just to show you how the artwork, this project can be connecting different disciplines, such as creating eco-village, or really pursuing alternative energy, and also inviting ecotourism, and also to understand cultural study, which they have a very deeply rooted, the culture is deeply rooted to nature, and we can learn about how the relationship between nature and also kind of eco agriculture, and then also really to
understand environmental ecological studies. So the art could be a kind of symbol to connect all the disciplines, to really kind of leads the direction or the guidance to the how we would like to pursue, to kind of imagine or picture our future to be. And so this was just to show you that particularly I was interested in this island because they have such a culture to really honor nature, and the ceremonies and festivals which are carried from 13 centuries, nothing has changed. And this is something that we can really learn from the culture, to really look back how we were connected with nature. And this was some women priestess gave some blessing ceremony at the day of a winter solstice. And this is, I did a little performance to also to bless the sun pillar to be up. And this is the image that you will see during a winter solstice. At the moment, the moonstone is not yet constructed and installed, but sun pillar is there, and to really kind of connect ourselves together with nature once again. And we hope to continue the project. And this year I'm starting one in Brazil, which is honoring nature of waterfalls. So I think through art, we can kind of bring our attention and bring our consciousness, such as like bring earth consciousness, to understand that all the nature, we are kind of residents of earth, and we need to protect one, and also we need to share with others, and also we are the nature as well. And this is something that I like to, this mind, I like to spread out to the world to share.
Thank you. Thank you, Mariko. Shireen?
Maybe you can give me the remotes.
That might help.
That might help. Just the first image, do you know? Yeah. I just thought about, since the time is brief, I thought about sitting on this panel with Mariko, who I have never met before, but I've followed her career over the time, and I've seen the evolution of her work, and that I see some parallels in terms of the evolution of our work. Both of us started with self-portrait photography, and both of us performed the role of the characters that we were trying to embody, and that both of us in some ways became somewhat of a social, cultural, political critique of our own societies, I think. And unlike other artists like Frida Kahlo or other artists whose self-portrait became, and the representation of their body became a canvas to tell their own personal stories, we acted like the critics of our own society. And of course, mine being more political and hers being more cultural critique, and now more environmental critique. Slowly, we became storytellers. And I think going away from self-portraiture to video, which we both continue to really work on videos. The only premise I want to make today is that as artists, even though we left our bodies behind in terms of being a representative of our concepts, every story that we touch on, every concept that we touch on continues to be a personal obsession. And I want to say that I only came to realize that today, that an artist has to become obsessed with something because of their personal experiences, because of their cultural upbringing, in order to make a body of work. And I never realized it like that. The question of me making the work that I did about the Islamic Revolution and the question of women who were martyrs you know, I never understood until later that I took that project in understanding the conviction of those who really believe in faith, in religion, that sort of allows them to go to that threshold of violence, etc. And later on, I made a number of videos that in all of those, even though, again, there were stories involved, the stories focus on the question of oppression, woman being an outcast, the question of exile. And in all of these stories, when I look back, actually were stories that it was something that I was dealing with as a person, a woman that always felt sort of lonely and outcast in her own society and outside. The question of exile. And I did a number of films working with the subject of orchard, which represented the idea of sort of a sacred space and typically is considered a place of exile. Sadly, not having my image, I cannot show those. But now, finally, the film that I'm working on today about this incredible Egyptian singer, Kulthum, who has become the most significant artist of the 20th century of the Middle East. My obsession with her is this question of how a woman, really an unconventional woman, she never got married, never had children, or she got married just for the purpose of convenience. But how could she, as a woman in a society that was male-dominated, as a woman artist, to become so popular and affect people both emotionally and politically? So I see in Kulthum a way of finding myself, a way to understand what it's like to be an artist that simultaneously is trying to reach out to people's emotions, but also politically send a message. I'm thinking more and more that, you know, that we artists are sometimes intuitively drawn to subject matters that we don't understand ourselves. Why? And unfortunately, not having my images, I will not be able to finish this point because visually I think it's very important to show it, but I think I stop at this point.
But let me ask you, do you think you were aware of this when you began making work, or this is something you've become more aware of, that in a way the work is coming from you, but it's about connecting with others?
Well, at the beginning, I thought, again, that I was just being more like a critique or someone who had an immense curiosity, and I only approached my work almost sociologically. But more and more, when I looked at my own work, I realized that there's this pattern that continues, that the artist herself as opposed to the world.
I mean, there are two things that I noticed too. I wanted to ask you both about the idea of collaboration. In a way, the work starts off initially about you and using yourself, and perhaps as it becomes more complicated, it requires a greater number of collaborations. And I wanted to know if that was just simply a function of the complexity of the work that you're both making now in terms of time, resources, skill set, or if you've sort of evolved in terms of your own practice and are more comfortable working with other people. I mean, has the process changed for you?
In a way, I always have image in my mind, and I've tried to get closer to the image that I have received. So that could be drawing, which is I can be doing myself alone, or that could be requires many people to be involved, sometimes 30, 40 people, and it's a process of a collaboration. And then I know, in the process, I have to know if I make some changes from what I have visioned, is that if this was like the path that I should be taking, but I didn't realize that when I saw the vision, or I should really push to trying to get my first vision was. This was really, during the process, I have to always be aware of which direction I should take. Often, actually, in the process, there's many hint that I have, which is that, in fact, the process is the work. Even though I saw the final vision, And then even though I produce the work, they're very closest to final vision, but answer is all in the process. That it's almost like the path, but it's not about producing at the end. It's about the process that the path. That was really the core of making work.
How does it work for you, Sharon?
In terms of collaboration?
Yeah.
Well, I work in photography, I work in video, and I work in cinema. I work in feature-length film. As you know, it involves a community of people. From the moment you write the script to the pre-production to production. And I think what I love about it, that it is a teamwork, and that it puts you out in the world, and it makes you get on locations to meet the people, and it's really hands-on, and it's really, also I love that it's not about making money. It's really, usually you don't make any money. With the artwork that I do, I have a studio. It's a solitary experience. I'm doing calligraphy over the images. I spend hours and hours alone. And I think there's a pleasure with that. But I think both in terms of the collaboration, but the nature of the audience, the nature of the work itself, the experiences that it brings to you, it couldn't be more different. And I think part of me being someone who's interested in being an activist, being out in the world, and at the same time, part of me who just wants to be a poet and be very, sort of closed off in a way, and reach people just emotionally. It serves a great purpose, being able to be a storyteller as opposed to making single images. And I've learned to even work with a photographer in the still photographer. So I'm not skilled at any of them. I've never studied photography or filmmaking, so I just bring people together to work with me.
So when you have an idea for a project, is it an intuitive process for you, or are you looking for ideas consciously that can advance your activism? That in a way you're kind of looking for particular stories that in a way embody the interests that you have?
It's a very good question. Being an Iranian artist who's had so much problem with my own country and have had so much politics define my everyday life, etc., I've never been able to emotionally separate politics from who I am and my work in a very urgent way. And I was just really incredibly drawn into Kulthum, and eventually I found out it's because her career, her being an artist, has always been this undivided relationship between being an artist and being a nationalist. Being an artist who fought for democracy and fought for people, and even helped the country in the moment of depression, economic depression, war, and yet affected people in the most mystical, the most emotional way, because people listened to her and fell into a state of ecstasy. So for me, this is a phenomenon. How can an artist do both? You can affect people with a political message, but you can reach out to their heart. And in this film, that's what I'm trying to create, where I could communicate that to the audience, that the artist could have a voice of different kinds. And I think my curiosity in her was I idealized her, because I don't think I achieved any of that myself nearly, but she did. When she died, 4 million people showed up at her funeral. It's unprecedented even for a Western artist, I think.
I mean, it's interesting. People tend to think of artists as selfish, and you spoke about them being obsessive and your need for an obsession, and yet knowing you both and knowing your work, I'm always struck at how generous you are, both in terms of your time and in terms of your dedication to your projects. And that seems to me to come, when I was listening to both of you, from a fundamental humanity. I mean, your subject matter is very different, but I wonder if you could talk a little bit about that kind of engagement and connection with other people. If you're looking to connect with other people through your work, if that's something consciously, Mariko, you want to do. You mentioned it a little bit, just in terms of a reverence for nature as being universal. Is that something that's driving your project?
Can you repeat the question?
You mentioned the words picture a future to be.
Yes.
Do you remember that?
Yes.
Maybe you could talk a little bit about that, what you meant by picturing a future to be.
Yes. Well, several years I was researching prehistoric culture, also from Japan, is also from Europe, and anyway, I discovered that they have kind of a universal language, and it's very similar concept, and it has a particular relationship with nature. And then, in a way, it seems to me that the people are playing for, you know, to the nature, and then this kind of a relationship that kept for a long time, but somehow in a modern society we are neglected and we've forgotten. And then I thought that perhaps the balance that we are at the moment, it's very unbalanced with nature and the human. And also we lost idea that we are also nature being as well, which is we really separated ourselves through the evolution of the society and so on. So by myself, physically and emotionally, be connected with nature and contact with nature, and also learning from those people who are in still doing ceremonies and still doing kept relationship with nature, we can learn so much from it. Then I realized that in order for us to leave the nature for the future generation, and also to have a future for the future generation, is that we have to really kind of go back, not completely go back, to be once again to really honor nature, like really to understand about the balance. And I thought that making artwork can help, because it can share the concept, because it's not linguistic, it's just the idea that you can share by experiencing work, which is very powerful, because all the borders, cultural borders, national borders, any borders we may have, can be transcended, because the art can speak to everyone, and then also reach to everyone, even to the local people, even to the art world people.
That's really interesting. And let me come back to this point. You know, they talk often about music as a universal language, and both of you employ music very much as a big part of your work, and in fact your projects to do with a sort of a musician of sorts, a singer. So I'd like to come back to that idea, but I did want to allow you, Shirin. It seems to me, to answer this question, if Mariko's picturing a future to be is about connecting with something lost, it seems to me your picturing of a future to be is something quite different, right? It's a more just, it's a more humane society. There's something else that you're striving for, is that right?
Well, I think for me, unfortunately, again, being Iranian, I always come back to the world events, and I wish I had the luxury where even in my work, I didn't have to keep going back to the question of the political time that we're living in. It's very difficult. But I think, for example, this last year, what transpired in the world, whether it was Occupy Wall Street or the Arab Spring, whatever, it just confirmed in my mind that at these times of trouble, political time, sort of upheavals, we need culture more than ever. And I think that I no longer, you know, and it's odd because in countries such as in Iran or Egypt, where we have censorship, we don't have support for art, we are sometimes imprisoned because of our work or exile. Artists have a larger place in the society than in the Western world. And artists' voices and work, it's a fundamental, central part of the discourse in the society. And I think that's a bit absent in the West, you know. And so I, within the last 2 years, have found a greater belief that culture could make a profound effect on the time that we're living in. And I don't mean by us turning into all activists or creating propaganda, but by raising consciousness, by touching people in ways that politicians couldn't, by bringing hope, by inspiring people, and ultimately governments and politicians come and go, but what remains is the artwork, is culture, isn't it? In a way of capturing history. And so, I mean, I think most Iranian people, Iranian artists at this time feel more empowered, oddly enough, at one of the worst part of our history, because in fact we feel a greater responsibility.
And do you feel a particular medium, film, video, is more appropriate or more accessible or a better way to transmit these ideas? Was that a conscious choice, you think, or just you evolved into that as a way of reaching people?
Well, there are two things. You know, once you enter the galleries and museums, you're already eliminating a large audience, the community of people who normally don't go to galleries and museums. Like my own mother has never been to a museum. And therefore, it's not so democratic, you know. Because you need to have an education in art history, I believe, to be able to approach any work of modern art. But I think in terms of the storytelling, in terms of cinema, it's more related to the mass culture. Everyone is eager to hear or look at a great story. So it is much more accessible. And I think cinema in that sense is closer to the popular culture, and is less market-driven, where I think with work of art, it ultimately becomes a commodity. And so for me, it's this very conscious decision that, yes, I like to be within the art galleries and museums, but I really, really want to bring the average audience to the movie theater and pay $10 to see this film. So it's a decision on my part, where the form also dictates the different audience.
Right. Mariko, you've worked extensively outside galleries, and your current project is really about finding a space and placing an object. What is your motivation to work outside of galleries and museums in that sense?
Well, that I still produce the work which is can exhibit in a museum and galleries, and to share this idea with audience. But I think the people has to be in the nature and to touch nature and feel the nature, and then the nature become a mirror of yourself. And in order to do that, I have to bring people into the nature. And that's why I produce the work, so that people do come to see it, and then therefore you will have interact with nature as well as the culture, the local culture, and so on. But I thought that's not, well, that's very important for me, but that's not still enough, because I also liked to communicate with the people in a city or in a museum or galleries, to really to share the ideas. So I thought that it was important for me to do both kind of work. And but the goal, the ideal situation, the goal is to really to connect the whole world and really take all the boundaries and have people to have consciousness of residence of Earth. Mm-hmm. So, and because when you look at the nature, it's a nature. It's belongs to everyone. It's not this part of Japan or this part of China, or it's really belongs to us, to all of us in the nature. And I think it's one point we have to have this kind of shared consciousness in order to have nature for ourselves for future being. I'm repeating myself. But this is something that it's a mission for me to do. And I thought that I can do this as an artist, that I can contribute to the world to share this idea.
Right. And as somebody that's gone looking for your artworks in remote natural locations, you've certainly introduced me to all sorts of strange environments that I'd never would have inhabited. We don't have a great deal of time, so I do want to leave a little bit of time for questions, but I do want to come back to that idea of music and the extent to which it's important in your work, because both of you do employ sound to some description. Maybe you could talk a little bit about that just very briefly.
Well, for me, music has been a tool to sort of emphasize the more emotional, poetic mystical aspect of my work and sort of neutralize some of the political narratives that I impose. So it's just a way of balancing, and again, being an artist who wants to touch people emotionally and rationally, I think for me music is one that really across the board touches people emotionally, and that's why I use it, and it affects me like that. So,
how is sound or music for you?
Well, my husband composed the sounds for me, and it's a different media, but it's to create a space. It's the sound and also the visuals and also feelings and object. It's a part. It's a part of a whole. Could be scent as well. Any sense that we have. It's just to create the world, and you can't really take up parts. It's in order to. Some work really requires to carry to create a space like that with. Giving you sixth sense. Yes.
Interesting. I'd love for you to have an opportunity to ask either of our panelists questions. So presumably we can arrange for a functioning microphone to make its way around the room. Thank you. Who's got a question for either of our? Please, here at the front. Yeah.
Yourself. Oh. Did you hear that?
Yes.
The question, if I'm not mistaken, was if it's not too personal, how have you been able to fund your projects? With great difficulty.
I formed foundation, so it was all private and corporate donations that I collected and to produce the work. Yes.
Well, it's different because for cinema, the budget is in the millions, but usually for mine, it's like a few million, and it's a struggle because the film we're making is usually subtitled. It's about the Middle East, But I already made one, and it was supported by European governments and foundations. And I think in this country there isn't much support for those kinds of films, but in Europe and in the Middle East we are getting support. For the art production, it's usually, for me, it's not a huge expense. I just shoot and, or I get support from the galleries. But with cinema, it's more, you really have to convince the people by a good script, a good document. Your name doesn't carry, it has to be a good script. And so we work sometime like now 2 years just development, and then and part of it financing.
Probably got time for just one more question, I think, and then you'll have an opportunity to interact. Sorry, was there a question here? I see someone's hand. Sorry. Thank you.
Thank you for your presentations. I have one question for Mariko and one for Shireen. So for you, your work is about nature and for humans to be part of nature. So I was wondering if you can say a little bit about your choice of material, because it didn't seem like natural material. So why that choice? And for Shireen, I was wondering if you can say a little bit about the organizational structure of a film crew, and what are the politics of that? And do you question that as you go about thinking about, questions of egalitarianism as the process?
Two terrific questions.
Yes. The material that which it's contemporary, and it's something that it requires some technology, and it's the best that what we can do to make something that haven't existed before in the world. And it's like honoring something to nature. I thought that there has to be, perhaps in a history, always been natural materials. But in a contemporary society, we were able to kind of produce something that haven't seen it before, or completely new, or like a vision of something that doesn't exist in the world. So I wanted to bring some to honor that the best I can do possibly can. That bring a beauty and aesthetics and also some transcendence and so on. And that was the material that I kind of came across.
If I understood the question right, for example, Woman Without Men, the last film, it was a film shot in Casablanca in Morocco by Iranian directors, supported by French, German, Austrian governments. And I think we had about 15 different nationalities as the crew. So ultimately, for example, if it's an Egyptian film, we need people to support the authenticity of the material, the research, the history, all of the costume and the locations, the music of Kulthum, those who are experts. But then we bring an Austrian or an Iranian cinematographer whose craft of cinematography is fantastic. Then we bring an editor from England. So in other words, it's usually with us, it's really an international effort, and it goes with the skills, but also people who are experts on the field of the material.
Thank you so much. Please put your hands together and thank our two wonderful speakers. Thank you very much.